The saying "you're only as old as you feel" is a well-intentioned but misguided way to make peace with our own aging.
They say time is measured in hours and years, but your spirit doesn't wear a watch. Maybe you've heard it before. Someone looks at you and says, "Wait, how old did you say you are?" At first, it might seem like a compliment or just genetics, but the truth might go deeper than that. What if it was the signature of the soul? Your body is a mirror. In spiritual teachings across the world, the body is seen not as a shell, but as a mirror, a living, breathing reflection of the soul's current state. And while we've been taught to see aging as a purely physical process, years passed, cells divided, time lost, some mystics would argue something else entirely. How you age is less about time and more about how fully your soul is aligned with its truth. In Taoist inner alchemy, it is believed that when your energy flows harmoniously, when your emotions don't stagnate, when your spirit isn't at war with your body, you don't just feel better, you look it. The Taoists call this harmony Shen Ming, the radiance of the spirit. It is not a glow that comes from cosmetics or creams. It is the deep lightness of someone whose soul is not being crushed by the weight of false living. And when that radiance is strong, the face stays soft, the eyes stay bright, the body stays lit from within. This is why, when you're around someone who seems younger than they are, it's not just about skin, it's about presence, lightness, play. It's the quiet rebellion of a soul that refuses to grow old before its time. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Some people look younger than they are because they've remembered something most forget. Life was never supposed to be this heavy. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've never really fit into the hard edges of adulthood. You take things seriously when needed, yes, but something inside you resists the grind. You don't carry bitterness, you don't feed drama. You might have even been told you're too soft, too idealistic, too trusting. But what if that softness is not weakness? What if it's preservation? The poet Hafiz once said, "Stay close to anything that makes you glad you are alive." And those who do, those who truly live by that, not just in theory, but in daily practice, begin to radiate something rare. They don't harden, they don't calcify, they stay open, flexible, bright. And something about their body responds by refusing to follow the normal timeline. In Buddhist teachings, this is echoed in the concept of right livelihood, the idea that when your way of living matches the truth of your being, suffering decreases and vitality increases. To be misaligned in work, in love, in identity, that is the true aging force. It wears the soul down, and eventually the body shows it. But those who have remembered their joy, their peace, their wild, curious essence, they reverse that weight. They age backwards, not because of miracle routines, but because of energetic truth. It comes with a cost. And yet, this glow doesn't come without a cost. People who look younger than they are often carry old souls, not in a tired way, but in a timeless one. They've seen things in lifetimes most can't name. They've chosen love over and over again, even when it hurt. They've let go of hate, even when it was justified. And with every cycle, they've lightened. They've peeled away what was false, what was heavy, what was never theirs. That's the paradox. The more lives you've lived, the less you carry. And the less you carry, the more youthful you appear. This is not a universal rule, but a hidden pattern. One seen in the eyes of healers, mystics, artists, and deeply intuitive souls across cultures. In Hinduism, it's reflected in the image of the sage who, though aged in years, looks serene and untouched. In African spiritual traditions, the old ones were often the most childlike, dancing, drumming, laughing freely, their joy undimmed by time. They knew something we've forgotten, that the soul's lightness feeds the body's youth, that growing up is not the same as growing hard. So if people look at you and say, "You don't look your age," maybe it's not the compliment you think it is. Maybe it's the universe whispering, "You've remembered something they haven't." Maybe it's a sign you came here with a mission, not to repeat the same path, but to walk it differently, to stay curious, to stay awake, to stay light, even when the world wants you to be heavy. And maybe the reason you don't age like others is because your soul never stopped playing. There's something unmistakable about the presence of someone who seems to defy time, not just in the way they look, but in the way they carry truth. Their words land heavier than their age would. Suggest. Their gaze is steady, ancient, soft, but knowing. You might have met someone like this before, or maybe you are that someone and you've always felt a strange dissonance between your age on paper and the depth you carry inside. History remembers people like this, and if you look closely, many of them didn't just act wise before their years, they looked like time never quite got a grip on them. One of the clearest examples is Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the 19th century Indian mystic. Known for his childlike laughter and softness, Ramakrishna was a man whose body never seemed to match the immense ocean of spiritual wisdom he carried. Even in his later years, visitors would comment that he looked almost too light for his body, as though his physical form were only half present. Despite this lightness, he moved with piercing clarity, speaking of divine truths with the innocence of a child and the depth of a sage. To be near him was to feel a strange paradox, someone who had clearly lived lifetimes and yet remained untouched by the dust of them. Then there's Meister Eckhart, the medieval Christian mystic and philosopher. From a young age, his sermons hinted at truths most scholars would never touch. He was born into a world defined by rigid theology, but what flowed from his mouth was something different. A reminder that God wasn't above or beyond us, but within us. His ideas were so far ahead of his time that he was condemned for heresy. But what's often forgotten is how young he was when he began voicing them. His physical presence was described as luminous, his eyes in particular unsettling in how much they seemed to see. Teresa of Avila, the Spanish mystic and saint, was another one. She began having spiritual visions as a young girl. While her outer appearance was that of a devout, gentle nun, she carried a fire inside that could silence entire rooms of scholars. She wrote with a fierce clarity, describing the soul's union with the divine as something ecstatic, not just devotional. Those who met her were struck by how her words felt too deep, too thunderous for someone her size and age. She moved like someone whose body had not yet caught up with the storm of light inside her. Even in more modern times, we've seen this pattern emerge. Think of Paramahansa Yogananda, the author of Autobiography of a Yogi. His presence in photographs is electric, serene, glowing, ageless. Those who met him often said he felt like he didn't belong to this timeline. His teachings weren't about escaping life, but living it with spiritual authority. He died at 59, but to many he seemed much younger, and infinitely older at the same time. His physical appearance was simply a container for something much more vast. And what about Malala Yousafzai? At only 17, she became the youngest person ever to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Her physical youth was undeniable, but her voice, her eyes, the weight of her conviction, those were ancient. There was something about her that felt carried across time, as if she was not just fighting for girls' education in Pakistan, but continuing a mission that began lifetimes ago. She had already lived in the fire and chose to come back through it. This theme repeats because it is not an accident. It is a signature. So if you look younger than you are, if people underestimate you until they hear you speak, if you've always felt older inside but somehow lighter outside, maybe it's not strange. Maybe it's exactly as it's meant to be. Maybe you are here not to blend into the age you're assigned, but to remind people that the soul can't be measured in birthdays, and that sometimes the body simply reflects what the spirit has already decided. This time, we carry less. This time, we glow. This time, we remember. The body follows the mind. There's a story from ancient China that has been told quietly for centuries. You won't find it in many textbooks, and yet its truth has lasted longer than empires. A boy was born in a small mountain village. From a young age, the elders noticed something unusual about him. Not just his bright skin or light step, but the way he listened. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words settled like soft stones into people's hearts. He would stop in the middle of play to close his eyes and breathe deeply, as though listening to something far away. At 8, he spoke of things most grown men feared to even whisper. At 10, he asked the monk in the temple why people cried when they died if the soul never ends. At 12, he spent hours watching the clouds move, saying, "They remember where they came from, so they are never in a hurry." Years passed, but his face hardly changed. At 20, he looked 16. At 30, he looked 20. At 50, no one could tell his age at all. One day, a traveller climbed the mountain path to see the boy who had now become a man that everyone said didn't age. When he finally met him, he asked, "How have you kept yourself so young? What is your secret?" The man only smiled and said, "The body follows the mind, and the mind follows the soul. If the soul is still dancing, what can grow old?" This parable, like many from Eastern traditions, speaks to something we often forget in our culture. Youth is not just a number, and aging is not just physical. There are people who grow old before their time because they carry a weight that isn't theirs, and there are others who seem to stay young, not because they escape time, but because they move with something older and lighter than it. In many Hindu and Buddhist traditions, there's an idea known as Lila, the divine play. It's the belief that the universe isn't a cold machine, but a dance. And those who begin to see life this way, not as a fight, not as a burden, but as something playful and sacred, begin to glow. Not because they are trying to, but because their spirit breathes differently. That glow you see in some people, the softness in their face, the light in their eyes, it's not just genetics or skincare, it's because they remember. They remember that they are more than this one life, more than this one version of themselves, and so they carry less fear, less bitterness, less tension. And tension is the real thief of youth. Even in ancient Greece, the philosopher Heraclitus spoke of this in his own way. He said, "You cannot step into the same river twice. Life is always flowing." But those who resist that flow, those who clutch, worry and fight it, age faster. The ones who accept the river, who float with it, and who find joy in the movement are the ones who seem untouched by time. To appear younger than your age may be your soul's way of revealing that you're aligned with something deeper. You might be someone who never fully forgot where you came from. You might have carried through lifetimes a kind of inner clarity that refuses to harden. You laugh easier, you forgive sooner, you don't hold on to every bruise life gives you. That doesn't mean you've had an easy life. In fact, it's often the opposite. Sometimes the souls who look the lightest are the ones who've passed through the darkest fires. They just chose not to let the fire burn their joy. They chose to heal in a way that made them softer, not harder. So if people tell you, you look young for your age, maybe smile quietly. Because what they're really noticing is not just your face, it's the way your soul still dances. And if you've always been the one who looks young but feels ancient on the inside, maybe you're here to remind others what it means to return to the dance. Not to take life less seriously, but to hold it with more grace. The body responds to the energy it's given. The more we tense, the more we harden. The more we flow, the more we glow. This doesn't mean we escape life's struggles, but we walk through them differently. Like the boy in the parable, we remember the sky. We remember the dance. So if you're reading this, maybe this is your reminder. You are not aging slowly. You are remembering quickly. And the more you remember who you really are, the more the body follows. Light always leaves a trace, and sometimes it shows up on your skin. Your deep empathy for others. There's something almost otherworldly about the way some people carry themselves. They walk into a room and you feel it before they speak. A gentleness, a warmth, an open presence that makes you feel seen. These people often seem younger than their years, but not in a superficial way. It's not just the skin or the sparkle in the eyes, it's something deeper, something that radiates from within, and in many cases it's tied to a spiritual gift that's as ancient as it is misunderstood: deep empathy. Empaths are not just nice people, they are spiritual instruments, attuned to the subtle shifts in energy, emotion, and unspoken truth. They don't just listen, they feel. And this feeling goes beyond sympathy or kindness. Empaths absorb the emotional vibrations of those around them, sometimes even of the environment itself. They can feel joy that's not theirs, and pain that no one else can see. This sensitivity, when channeled wisely, becomes a source of extraordinary purity. Because to carry emotions so deeply, yet not become bitter, that is a path only the strongest souls walk. In Eastern traditions, this kind of soul sensitivity is known to create a kind of inner chi harmony, a flow of subtle energy that circulates through the body unobstructed. And when energy flows freely, it heals. Empaths tend to cleanse themselves emotionally, not by avoiding the world, but by transforming what they feel. When they're around grief, they grieve with you, but they don't stay stuck in the grief. When they encounter joy, they hold space for it without trying to claim it. They are mirrors, but also filters, transmuting heavy energy into something lighter, and this practice, whether they realize it or not, keeps their inner world clear. That clarity shows. They look fresh, not because life has been easy, but because they don't carry what doesn't belong to them. They've learned to release rather than store, to soften rather than resist, and that inner flow keeps their spirit young, and their body unburdened by the stress that often weighs others down. And then there's inner wisdom, a close companion to empathy. You've likely met someone like this. They don't speak often, but when they do, it lands. Their words feel like water on fire. They aren't racing to prove themselves. They aren't obsessed with being right. There's a spaciousness to their presence, an ease, and this wisdom isn't tied to age. Many people who carry it are surprisingly young, or appear that way, because inner wisdom doesn't wrinkle the face, it relaxes it. This calm has a protective quality. While others get swept up in the noise of the moment, reacting, defending, clinging, those with inner wisdom pause. They reflect. They ask questions like, "What is this teaching me?" Or, "Is this worth my peace?" And that mental spaciousness preserves more than just their time. It preserves their energy. And over time, that energetic lightness becomes visible in their body. Their skin seems less weighed down, their features soften, their eyes shine, not with naivety, but with a quiet knowing. In Buddhism, this quality is seen in the figure of Kuan Yin, the bodhisattva of compassion. She's often portrayed as eternally youthful, yet ancient in wisdom. Why? Because compassion and wisdom, when fully embodied, purify the soul, and a purified soul has no weight left to carry. Kuan Yin's youthful glow isn't cosmetic, it's spiritual clarity, unblocked by the distortions of fear, pride, or reactivity. Empaths and wise souls often walk together. One feels the world deeply, the other sees it clearly. And when both qualities are present in someone, they begin to glow, not because they seek attention, but because they've aligned with a deeper truth. Their beauty is not decoration, it's resonance, and people sense it, even if they can't explain it. So if you're someone who's always felt deeply, or someone who's always carried a kind of calm wisdom, this might be your explanation. You're not just lucky, you're aligned. You've been living in a way that honors both emotion and stillness. And while the world might not always value this combination, your body remembers, your soul remembers, and it reflects outward through your expression, your voice, your posture, your energy. You don't need to age like the world expects you to. You're allowed to carry lightness. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to feel deeply, speak kindly, and move slowly. That's not a weakness. That's your spiritual rhythm. And it shows. Because sometimes, the youngest looking people are actually the oldest souls, finally at peace with the journey they've walked, and the light they're meant to carry next. Your kind spirit. When you let go of hatred, when you no longer hold anger like a weapon or a shield, something incredible happens. Your life force begins to flow more freely. In many ancient healing systems, like traditional Chinese medicine, emotions are not just in your head, they live in the body. Anger, when left unchecked, is said to block the liver meridian. Grief can sink into the lungs. Fear freezes the kidneys. Over time, these emotional blockages create disharmony, not just in the spirit, but in the body itself. But kindness, true kindness, works like a cleansing current. It keeps the internal river clear. People who embody compassion tend to carry less internal tension. They forgive more easily. They listen more deeply. And most importantly, they welcome life, even when it's messy. This acceptance frees them from the chronic tightness that so many carry in their chest, their jaw, their gut. And when the inner body is free, the outer body reflects it, through a brighter complexion, relaxed muscles, clearer eyes. But more than anything, through an unmistakable energy. The kind of energy that makes others feel safe around them without knowing why. This is the quiet magic of compassion. It doesn't just help others, it heals the one who offers it. When you live with empathy, you stop fighting against the current of life. You begin to swim with it. and this harmony shows up not just in your emotions but in your posture, your voice, your breath. People who live this way often radiate youth, not in the way of trying to look young, but by being untouched by the weight of emotional toxins. The truly compassionate soul is not naive. They have seen the darker sides of humanity. They've been hurt, disappointed, tested, but instead of hardening, they've softened. And in that softness, they found a strength that most people overlook, the strength of remaining light in a heavy world. That lightness is ageless. Their joy is quiet but contagious. Their presence feels like springtime, even in the middle of a storm, and without even trying, they glow. Not because they've escaped suffering, but because they've transmuted it. They've let it make them more tender, not more guarded. That kind of beauty isn't skin deep, it's soul deep, and the world feels it every time they walk into a room. It's the quiet power of those who can bend without breaking. You bend without breaking. People who live with adaptability carry a kind of grace that isn't loud, but deeply magnetic. It shows up in their tone of voice, in the way their shoulders sit, in the way their face softens, even in times of pressure. And somehow, without even trying, they seem younger than their years. Why is that? It's because life itself is always changing, never fixed, never predictable. And those who resist this constant motion end up carrying the weight of every detour, every disappointment, every lost plan. Over time, that weight begins to show. It lives in the tension of the brow, the stiffness of the jaw, the heaviness behind the eyes. But those who learn to move with life instead of against it, they stay light. Adaptability isn't about giving up. It's about letting go of the illusion that we can control everything. It's choosing to trust the flow, even when it takes a sharp turn. Like water, which never argues with the shape of the land, it simply finds a new path. And in that fluidity, it stays alive, it stays moving, it stays pure. In Taoist philosophy, water is considered the most powerful element not because it's forceful, but because it yields. It adapts to every obstacle, wears down even stone, and yet remains true to itself. The adaptable person lives this same wisdom. They meet change without panic. They greet uncertainty without resistance. And because of this, they avoid the kind of inner stress that ages the body more than time ever could. You can often recognize these people by their calm presence. When something goes wrong, they don't explode. They breathe. When plans fall apart, they don't freeze. They adjust. And over the years, this inner flexibility becomes visible on their faces, not in tightness, but in softness. Not in fear, but in ease. Their skin reflects a life that hasn't been clenched, but released. This doesn't mean they haven't suffered. On the contrary, many of them have known deep pain. But instead of letting that pain calcify into bitterness, they let it shape them into something wiser, gentler, freer. They've learned that resistance doesn't stop life's storms, it just makes them harder to bear. So they've become the eye of the storm, still, open, alive. There's a Tibetan belief that the more flexible a spirit, the closer it is to enlightenment. Not because flexibility is passive, but because it allows the soul to stay in motion. It lets the light through. People like this don't hold on to things that are trying to leave. They don't grip onto identities, roles, or timelines that no longer serve them. They know that clinging creates tension, and tension over time becomes suffering. So they flow, they move, and in doing so, they stay young. Not just in body, but in soul. That lightness you sense when you're near them. It's not just personality, it's spiritual posture, a kind of openness that keeps their inner world from becoming hard and cold. And that inner climate, warm, fluid, peaceful, radiates outward in subtle but undeniable ways. Their smile reaches their eyes, their presence makes you feel safe, their energy feels like a deep exhale. Adaptability then becomes not just a life skill, but a beauty secret of the soul, the kind that can't be bottled or bought, but only earned by learning how to let go. And those who have learned this art, they move through life with the quiet confidence of someone who knows, no matter what happens, they will find their way forward. You irradiate positive energy. Quite the opposite. Many of these people have known deep pain, but they've chosen, consciously or not, to look at the world through the lens of hope. Where others see ruin, they glimpse redemption. Where some dwell on the past, they lean into what could be. This orientation of the spirit isn't just a mindset, it's a medicine. It nourishes the soul, and over time it shows in the face. A joyful spirit does. Something alchemical. It softens stress before it can sink into the skin. It lifts the body into ease, slows the nervous system, and opens the heart to laughter. This lightness makes people more magnetic, more present, and yes, more youthful. Their energy becomes contagious. Their laughter doesn't just echo, it heals. And in their presence, time doesn't seem to move the same. Ancient Eastern philosophies have long spoken of this shining spirit. In Taoist texts, those who align with the Tao, the natural flow of life, are said to radiate day, a kind of luminous virtue. It isn't loud or boastful. It's quiet, like sunlight through leaves. It's that kind of soft power that makes someone seem not only ageless, but eternal. But there's something even deeper at play in some of these radiant souls. This balance, this spiritual alignment, protects them. It creates a kind of internal coherence that shields them from the aging force of chaos and stress. Because every day they live in tune with that mission, they're not wasting energy resisting life. They're flowing with it, giving from a deep well, speaking from a still center. And because of that, their body responds, their cells glow, their face softens, their movements remain fluid, untouched by the usual weight of time. There's an old parable from the Andes about a child born with silver eyes. The villagers feared her at first, but as she grew, her laughter healed crops, her hands calmed storms. She looked the same from her 10th year to her 30th, never aging, always singing. "Why does she not change?" they asked. And the elder replied, "Because she was never bound by time, she came to change it." Whether literal or symbolic, the story speaks to something true. There are those who seem immune to time because they are deeply aligned with timeless work. And in that alignment, be it through joy, purpose, healing, or compassion, they unlock something that most forget even exists, a youth that comes from within. So if you've ever felt like you carry a light that others can't explain, if you've felt a quiet call to bring comfort, wisdom, or beauty to this world, if you've ever looked in the mirror and noticed your face hasn't aged the way the world said it should, perhaps it's because your soul chose this life not just to endure but to uplift. And in doing so, your very being became the message. You're not just glowing, you're remembering. Your quiet abundance. There's something else you begin to notice in those who carry youth like a quiet secret. Their lives seem touched by a kind of quiet abundance. It's not always wealth in the traditional sense, but something richer, deeper. They tend to attract what they need. Opportunities arise. People gravitate toward them. They rarely chase, yet life seems to meet them halfway. This is no coincidence. Youthfulness of the spirit is often the result of living in alignment with an inner abundance that the world can't give and therefore cannot take away. These people don't hoard or grasp. They trust. They give freely, knowing what flows out returns. They create beauty, connection, and peace in their daily lives, not out of obligation, but because it overflows from within. And that abundance of love, energy, curiosity, joy reflects back in their body. It relaxes the face, it softens the gaze, it invites light in. In Chinese mythology, this quality of inner richness was often linked to figures of immortality. Take, for example, the 8 immortals of Taoist legend. These weren't gods in the traditional sense, but ordinary people, artists, scholars, warriors, who achieved immortality not through power or wealth, but by mastering the balance between inner peace and outer action. One of them, Lan Kaihie, was often depicted as genderless, playful, and ageless. They were said to have the wisdom of the old and the joy of the young, singing in the streets and dancing with flowers in their hair. People could never quite tell how old they were. Some said 20, others 200. Their secret: a life lived in harmony with nature, free of attachments, full of trust. This is the essence of spiritual abundance, when you stop chasing and start flowing. When your happiness isn't bound to outcomes but to presence. When your wealth isn't what you own but how you give. And the ones who live like this, often without realizing it, preserve themselves. Their cells aren't worn down by chronic stress. Their minds aren't clouded by resentment. Their bodies aren't tensed in fear. They smile more, laugh deeper, sleep better, and it shows. Lan Kai-he wasn't alone in this symbolism. Shu Xing, the Chinese deity of longevity, is always depicted with a tall forehead and a beaming smile. He carries a peach of immortality, a symbol of inner contentment and ripened virtue. It's said that those who cultivate joy, kindness, and peace grow the inner peach themselves. Their spirit becomes so full, so whole, that time forgets how to touch them. In this way, youth becomes a reflection of your relationship with life itself. Are you holding on too tightly? Are you resisting what wants to change? Or are you trusting, opening, blooming? Those who seem to stay young are not always the ones who've had the easiest lives, but they are often the ones who've learned to live from the inside out. They've stopped measuring life by numbers or achievements, and instead started measuring it by how deeply they feel, how kindly they love, and how freely they let go. This is the true path of the ageless spirit. Abundance not as accumulation, but as overflow. Not as control, but as harmony. Not as something you take, but something you become. And here's where the quiet truth settles in. When your life becomes an expression of that inner abundance, when you live from overflow rather than lack, you start to realize that youthfulness isn't a fleeting stage of the body, but a steady state of the soul. The world teaches us to chase youth as if it's something slipping away, like sand through a clenched fist. But those who carry it naturally don't chase it at all. They simply stop gripping life so tightly. They don't run from age. They grow toward light. There's something magnetic about a person who has nothing to prove. Their presence is weightless, yet grounding. Their joy isn't loud, but it lingers. When they speak, people listen, not because their words are rehearsed, but because their silence has been deep. These are the people who glow without trying. Their skin may wrinkle and their hair may silver, but their spirit stays unclouded. Because they've tapped into a truth that no mirror can reflect, that the inner world writes the outer story. Across traditions, this wisdom appears again and again. In ancient Indian thought, there's the concept of sattva, a quality of being that is clear, balanced, and luminous. Those who live in sattva are not in conflict with the world around them, nor with the world within. They eat gently, speak gently, think with care. They are not attached to outcomes. They do not shout over others to be heard. Instead, their very way of moving through life becomes a medicine to those around them. And when your life is medicine, you yourself stay whole. This doesn't mean these people don't feel pain. In fact, they often feel more. Their hearts are not armoured, but they don't drown in the emotion. They let it move through like weather. They weep when it rains, they bloom when the sun returns. That kind of openness doesn't weaken you. It keeps your spirit elastic. And elasticity over time is what the body remembers. Not just muscles and bones, but breath, rhythm, energy. It's easy to think of this as something reserved for mystics or monks, but it's not. It's for anyone who is willing to return to simplicity. Not in a naive way, but in the wise, deliberate way of someone who's tasted complication and found it lacking. Think of the elder who laughs like a child, the artist who still gets lost in colour, the gardener who names every plant and greets the sunrise as an old friend. These are not people chasing youth. They are people who never stopped noticing beauty. There is also a kind of sacred rebellion in this way of being. In a world that profits from your insecurity, choosing joy is revolutionary. Choosing gentleness in a harsh world is not weakness, it is mastery. And those who live this way aren't trying to convince anyone. They don't preach, they don't pose, they simply are. And that being is contagious. Even science has begun to catch up to what mystics have always known. Studies now show that our thoughts, emotions, and social connections shape our biology. Chronic stress accelerates aging, peace slows it down, laughter literally lengthens life, gratitude strengthens the immune system, and joy, simple, honest joy, regulates your heartbeat, your hormones, your sleep. So when someone seems to defy time, maybe it's not magic, maybe it's just presence. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's a concept called Turgal, a vision practice that leads to rainbow body, a state where the practitioner's form dissolves into light at death. Whether taken literally or symbolically, the message is the same. When the body becomes a pure expression of spirit, it is no longer limited by time. Even in this life, when we live from that clarity, that truth, we begin to shine through the shell. Our spirit speaks louder than the years. So if you've ever been told you look young, or if you felt that your age doesn't match the way you carry yourself, don't dismiss it. Don't shrug it off. It may not be genetics or skincare or good lighting. It may be your soul's way of revealing its depth. It may be the result of choices you've made to forgive, to love, to feel, to release. Each moment of grace you've given yourself has written itself into your face, and if you feel like you've lost touch with that radiance, don't worry. You haven't lost it, you've just forgotten. All it takes is one quiet moment to return, one deep breath to soften the armor, one act of beauty, for no reason at all, to wake it back up. Because youth, real youth, isn't behind you. It's not ahead of you. It's something you access, again and again, by choosing to live from the place that never ages, the place of joy, the place of stillness, the place where you trust, not because you've never been hurt, but because you're no longer ruled by the wound. This is where youth lives, not in your skin, in your soul. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.